The front yard was a disaster zone. Muddy tire tracks crisscrossed the once pristine lawn, leading to the completely obliterated flower garden in the corner. Shards of terracotta pots and uprooted plants were strewn everywhere, the vibrant blooms crushed under the weight of heavy truck tires. "What, in God's name?" I muttered, clutching the ragged shawl tighter around my shoulders as I stepped outside. The crisp autumn air carried the pungent scent of overturned soil and broken stems. Tyler came running up behind me, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Grandma, what happened? The garden." His voice trailed off as he surveyed the destruction. Before I could respond, the front door slammed open, and Jenna stormed out, her face flushed with anger. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed, marching across the ruined yard towards Kyle's idling pickup truck. "How could you do this?" Kyle leaned out the window, a cruel smirk twisting his features. "That's what you get for wasting time on stupid plants with my mother-in-law instead of being a proper wife." My heart sank as I realized the carnage was his doing. I wrapped my arm around Tyler's shoulders, pulling him close to shield him from the verbal onslaught. "You're seriously throwing a tantrum over some flowers?" Jenna's voice dripped with disbelief. "Those stupid plants made Tyler happy." "They were a project for him and my mom." "Your mom's an old biddy living off us like a freeloader," Kyle spat. "It's time she learned her place." Those cruel words lanced through me, dredging up memories of the countless sly digs and belittling comments he'd thrown my way since marrying Jenna. I'd endured it all to keep the peace, to not risk losing the family I had left. But seeing my beloved garden in ruins, witnessing the heartbreak on Tyler's face, something inside me snapped. I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to drown out the sound of Kyle's raised voice drifting in from the living room. Jenna had attempted to confront him about the garden incident, but as usual, he twisted everything around to make her feel like the one in the wrong. "If you didn't let that old hag fill your head with delusions about playing in the dirt, we wouldn't have these issues." Kyle's words sliced through the air like a whip. I flinched, my hands stilling over the dish I was drying. Tyler looked up from his spot at the kitchen table with worried eyes. "Don't listen to him, Grandma," he said softly. "The garden was special." Fighting back tears, I forced a smile. "I know, sweetie. Why don't you go upstairs and play for a bit? I'll call you down for dinner." Once he'd scampered off, I leaned back against the counter, pinching the bridge of my nose. The ache behind my eyes matched the tightness in my chest. How much more of Kyle's cruelty could I stomach? "You're damn right I let her delusions." Jenna's voice rang out, startling me. "That garden made Tyler so happy after everything, and you just had to ruin it like the petty, immature jerk you are." There was a pause, and I could picture Kyle's face twisting into that all-too-familiar sneer. "Well, if you'd bothered being a decent wife instead of chasing hobbies with Mom, maybe I wouldn't have to put you in your place." The sick implication in his words made my blood run cold. I clutched the dish towel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Put me in my place?" Jenna echoed, her tone icy. "You arrogant, abusive asshole." A loud crash shattered the tense silence, followed by Jenna's cry of pain. I dropped the towel and raced into the living room to find her crumpled on the floor, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. Kyle towered over her menacingly, his fist still clenched. "You'll speak to me with respect," he growled. "I put a roof over your head and your mom's. You'd both be on the street without me." White-hot rage blazed through me, burning away any fear or resignation I'd felt before. I grabbed a nearby vase, the curved glass cool against my palm. "Get away from my daughter," I snarled, hurling the vase with every ounce of strength I had. It struck Kyle square in the back of the head with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the floor unmoving as Jenna scrambled back with a shocked gasp. For a suspended moment, the only sound was our ragged breathing. Then Tyler's footsteps pounded down the stairs. "Mom? Grandma? What's going on?" Jenna shot me a wide-eyed look, her expression a swirl of fear, pain, and the first flickers of resolve. We both knew in that instant that things could never go back to how they were. The days after the vase incident were tense and volatile. Kyle had regained consciousness with a nasty gash and concussion, but true to form, he downplayed the violence he'd inflicted on Jenna. We tiptoed around him, never knowing when his fuse might ignite again. Tyler stuck close by my side, his usual bright demeanor dimmed by the heaviness that now permeated our home. One afternoon, I found him staring forlornly out the window at the ravaged garden plot. "I miss working on the flowers with you," he said in a small voice. My heart constricted at his crestfallen expression. Ruffling his hair, I tried to inject some lightness into my tone. "Me too, buddy. But you know what? We can start over. Make it even better than before." His eyes widened with cautious hope. "Really? But what about Kyle?" "Don't you worry about him." I leveled him with a resolute look. "This is our home, too. We're not going to let anyone take away the things that make us happy, okay?" Tyler nodded slowly, a tiny smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Okay, Grandma, I trust you." Those simple words unlocked something fierce and protective inside me. For too long, I'd let Kyle's venom slowly drain the joy from our lives out of some misguided attempt at keeping the peace. But seeing the garden he'd so callously destroyed reawakened my passion. The same passion I wanted to pass on to Tyler. The next morning, while Jenna was out running errands and Kyle was still fast asleep, I gathered some gardening tools and led Tyler outside to the wreckage. He watched with rapt attention as I mapped out a new layout, explaining how we'd rebuild the garden beds from scratch. "We'll make it bigger and better," I promised, "with all your favorite flowers and some new ones, too." Tyler's face lit up with excitement, and we got to work tilling the soil and gathering supplies from the shed. By the time Jenna returned, we had the first bed prepped and ready for planting. "Mom, look!" Tyler bounded over, practically vibrating with pride. "Grandma and I are making a new garden." Jenna's brows knit together as she took in the scene, but her expression quickly softened into one of weary resignation. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want any more problems." "Don't worry, dear." I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "This is our home. We're taking it back, one flower at a time." Over the next few weeks, Tyler and I spent every spare moment nurturing our garden revival. With each seedling that sprouted and bloomed, I could see his self-assurance growing right alongside the plants, and Jenna, after her initial reservations, seemed to draw strength from our small oasis of defiance as well. Kyle, of course, doubled down on his sneers and taunts about our stupid hobby. But his words carried less venom, deflecting off the newfound sense of purpose that buoyed us. This garden was more than just flowers. It was a reclaiming of our space, our happiness. And even Kyle's cruelty couldn't uproot that. The garden was really taking shape now, the vibrant blooms a colorful rebuke to Kyle's attempts to grind us down. Tyler spent hours happily tending to the plants alongside me, his small hands surprisingly deft with the pruning shears and trowel. "This sunflower is going to be even taller than you soon, Grandma," he exclaimed one sunny afternoon, gently adjusting the thick green stalk. I chuckled, brushing a bead of sweat from my brow. "Is that so? Well, I can't have my favorite gardener showing me up." A familiar derisive snort made us both stiffen. Kyle sauntered over, already clutching a beer despite it being barely noon. "Waste of time and money, if you ask me," he said, sneering at the lush garden beds. "All that work for some dumb plants." Tyler's shoulders slumped, and I felt a flare of protective anger. Before I could retort, though, he pressed on with a mocking tone. "But I guess that's all an old lady's good for these days, huh?" He fixed me with a cruel smirk. "Digging around in the dirt with the grandkids." The emasculating implication hung heavy in the air. I drew myself up, refusing to let him rattle me like he so clearly wanted. "At least I'm doing something productive and bringing joy," I said evenly. "Which is more than I can say for you." Kyle's eyes flashed with rage, but I held his gaze, unflinching. After a tense moment, he scoffed and turned on his heel, storming back into the house and letting the screen door slam behind him. "Don't listen to him, Tyler," I said gently, pulling the boy into a one-armed hug. "He's just trying to be mean because he doesn't understand." Tyler nodded, but his shoulders remained tense as he turned back to the garden with a troubled frown. Over the next few days, Kyle's barbs and taunts increased in frequency. It's like he was trying to grind us down through sheer repetition. Jenna finally confronted him one evening after he'd made another snide comment about the stupid hobby within Tyler's earshot. "Why do you have to be such a jerk about this?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "It makes Tyler happy, and it's not hurting anyone." Kyle's lip curled in an ugly sneer. "Oh, what? You're taking their side now?" typical woman falling for dumb emotional crap. The sexist remark hung in the air, scathing and vile. Jenna's face flushed an angry crimson. "How dare you, you arrogant, backwards pig!" In a flash, Kyle was on his feet, towering over her in a way that made my heart pound. "You'll watch your tone when you speak to me," he growled, fists clenching. I instinctively moved to put myself between them, but Jenna held up a hand to stop me. There was a new fire blazing in her eyes, one I'd never seen before. "Or what?" she challenged, her voice low but unwavering. "You'll hit me again like last time? Go ahead and try it, you pathetic bully." Kyle looked taken aback by her sudden defiance. His gaze flicked briefly to me before settling back on Jenna with a sneer. "Whatever, have fun playing with your stupid flowers." He stormed off towards the den, but the air was thick with a sense that something had shifted. As Jenna met my eyes, I saw the first flickers of resolve hardening her expression. No more placating. No more walking on eggshells around his toxic temper. We were taking a stand, one bloom at a time. The garden had become a vibrant oasis amidst the escalating tension in our household. Each morning, Tyler and I would slip outside to tend the beds, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing new growth. "The zinnias are finally blooming," he exclaimed one day, carefully snipping a few stems to bring inside. I smiled, admiring the jewel-toned petals. "They're beautiful. Why don't you put them in a vase for the kitchen table?" His face lit up at the suggestion. As he scampered off, I settled onto the small bench Kyle had begrudgingly assembled months ago, brushing my fingers over the soft velvet of a peony bloom. The screen door banged open, shattering the tranquil moment. Kyle stomped out, his expression thunderous as he made a beeline for me. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" he snarled, looming over me. "Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." I tensed, bracing for another round of his verbal abuse. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb." He jabbed a meaty finger towards the garden, filling the kid's head with this gardening crap, making him soft. My jaw clenched at the implication. Tyler's not soft. He's caring and in touch with nature, something you could learn from. Kyle's face mottled with rage. "You'll keep your trap shut about how I raise my son, you hear me?" The possessive words made my blood run cold. I opened my mouth to retort, but a small voice piped up from behind. "I'm not your son." We both whirled to see Tyler standing in the doorway, knuckles white around the vase of zinnias. His expression was uncharacteristically steely as he fixed Kyle with an icy glare. "You're just my mom's mean husband, and you're not going to talk to my grandma like that anymore." Kyle looked momentarily taken aback by the boy's vehemence, before his face contorted in an ugly sneer. "You need to learn some respect, kid." "No, you need to learn some respect." Tyler's voice rose to a shout, startling us all. "Grandma's garden is amazing, and you're just a big jerk who doesn't get it." With that, he flung the vase with all his might, shattering it at Kyle's feet in a kaleidoscope of water, glass, and vibrant petals. Kyle sputtered, staring down at the shards in disbelief. "Why, you little—" "Kyle, that's enough!" Jenna's voice rang out as she hurried outside, putting herself between her husband and son. "You will not speak to him that way, do you understand me?" Kyle opened his mouth, undoubtedly to spit more venom, but seemed to think better of it at the look on Jenna's face. His hands clenched and unclenched as he struggled to rein in his temper. "Fine," he bit out at last. "Do whatever you want. Waste your time playing in the dirt." He turned on his heel and stormed back inside, the screen door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. An uneasy silence fell over the yard, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. Jenna let out a shaky breath, pulling Tyler into a fierce hug. "It's okay, baby. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself and Grandma." Tyler clung to her, his earlier bravado melting into quiet sniffles. I laid a hand on his back, marveling at his display of courage in the face of Kyle's aggression. As mother and son held each other, I caught Jenna's eye over Tyler's bowed head. A silent resolution passed between us, hardening my resolve. No more placating the bully, no more walking on eggshells. It was time to uproot the poison from our family once and for all, by whatever means necessary. The days following Tyler's outburst were marked by a tense, uneasy truce. Kyle avoided us, skulking around the house with a perpetual scowl. Jenna insisted we leave him be to simmer down, but I could see the newfound glint of determination in her eyes. She was done making excuses for his behavior. Tyler and I threw ourselves into the garden, using the meditative act of tending the plants as an escape from the strain. One crisp autumn afternoon, we were harvesting the last of the tomato crop when Kyle's raised voice shattered the quiet. "You're delusional if you think I'm going to keep bankrolling this ridiculous hobby." My head snapped up at the sound of his boots crunching across the yard towards us. Tyler shrank back, his eyes wide with apprehension. "It's okay," I murmured, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. "Just stay calm." Kyle stormed up, his face mottled with rage. "You two better start packing up this mess. I'm done wasting money on dirt and plants." "You don't get to make those decisions," I said, keeping my tone even as I rose to face him. "This is our home, too." His beady eyes narrowed into slits. "It's my house that I paid for. I'll do what I want. Actually, it's my house, too." Jenna's voice rang out as she emerged from the back door. "My name's on the deed, same as yours." Kyle whirled on her with an ugly snarl. "You saying you'll defy me, woman? After everything I've given you?" The sexist implication hung in the air like a lead weight. Jenna's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm saying this is over, Kyle. I'm done with your tantrums and abuse. You ungrateful bee." The slur seemed to trigger something primal in Kyle. With a feral roar, he lunged towards Jenna, fists raised. She cried out, stumbling back. Before I could even process what was happening, Tyler darted forward and planted himself between them. "Don't you touch her!" Kyle skidded to a halt, his eyes widening in shock. Tyler stood his ground, trembling but resolute. "You need to leave," the boy said, his voice quavering but firm. "Get out of our house and don't come back." A muscle twitched in Kyle's clenched jaw as he stared the child down. For a horrible, suspended moment, I feared he might strike out again. Then his expression contorted into a sneer of pure loathing. "Fine. You can have this, shithole." He turned and stomped back towards the detached garage, yanking the door open with savage force. I watched in numb shock as he climbed into his idling truck, peeling out of the driveway in a spray of gravel. We stood rooted to the yard, the rumble of the engine fading into tense silence. Jenna was the first to move, scooping Tyler up and hugging him fiercely. "That was so brave, baby," she whispered, planting kisses on his hair. "I'm so proud of you." Tyler clung to her, his small body trembling with residual adrenaline. As I moved to embrace them both, Kyle's truck suddenly roared back into view. My heart stuttered in my chest as he slammed it into park, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged fury. Without a word, he mashed his foot down on the accelerator. The truck surged forward in a cloud of exhaust and spinning tires, demolishing the raised garden beds in its path. I could only watch in numb horror as months of hard work, of love and healing, was obliterated in mere seconds beneath the churning wheels. When the engine finally cut out, the only sound was Jenna's anguished sobs mingling with Tyler's cries. Kyle threw open the truck door and spat a glob of phlegm onto the ruined flower beds. "There's your stupid garden, you miserable old hag," he snarled at me. "I hope it was worth it." Then, with one last contemptuous glare, he peeled out of the driveway and disappeared around the corner. In the aftermath, the three of us could only cling to each other amidst the devastation, raw grief and rage mingling into a potent, bitter cocktail. He'd taken things too far this time, and he was going to pay dearly for it. The aftermath of Kyle's rampage was a blur of police reports, terse statements, and Jenna's heart-wrenching sobs. Tyler clung to me, his small frame racked with tremors as the reality of his stepfather's cruelty sank in. "Why did he do that, Grandma?" he kept asking in a tiny, broken voice. The garden was so beautiful. I could only hold him close, anger and grief warring within me. That garden had represented so much more than flowers. It was a reclamation of our home, our happiness, and Kyle had obliterated it out of sheer spite. The police officers who responded were professional but clearly skeptical of the whole angry husband-destroying garden story. I could see the dismissive looks as Jenna rehashed Kyle's escalating verbal abuse and controlling behavior. Just another domestic dispute, their expressions seemed to say. "We'll file a report, but good luck getting anything to stick." It was a harsh reminder that the system was stacked against victims like us. Kyle was a wealthy, successful businessman, the type who could easily manipulate the narrative to make himself the aggrieved party. As the officers took their notes and departed, Jenna slumped onto the couch, cradling her head in her hands. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, sounding utterly defeated. "He'll just keep coming after us." A righteous fury blazed within me at her broken tone. I'd failed as a mother, allowing this poisonous man to infiltrate our family and erode my daughter's sense of self-worth. But I wouldn't fail as a grandmother. Crossing the room, I knelt in front of Jenna and grasped her hands firmly. "Listen to me. You're going to leave that bastard and take him for everything he's worth." She blinked at me, eyes widening slightly. "Mom, I can't. He'll fight me on it and drag it through the courts for years, with his lawyers and money." "Which is exactly why you have to do it." I gave her hands an emphatic squeeze. "He may have all the resources, but we have right on our side. What he did, destroying our home out of sheer malice, that's inexcusable." Jenna wavered, insecurity flickering across her features. "You really think I can win against him?" "I know you can." I lifted her chin, holding her gaze intently. "You're my daughter, strong, resilient, and so much tougher than that petty bully could ever comprehend. It's time to show that bastard exactly what we're made of." For a long moment she searched my face, something fragile kindling in her eyes. Then finally, her expression hardened into steely determination. "You're right," she said, her voice low but resolute. "I'm done letting him control me, done subjecting Tyler to his toxic crap. It's time to burn that bridge and salt the earth." I pulled her into a fierce embrace, fresh tears of pride and hope stinging my eyes. "That's my girl. We'll take him for everything. The house, his assets, every last penny. And when it's all over," she whispered fiercely, "we build a garden twice as beautiful in the rubble of what he destroyed, a garden just for us." Tyler, who'd been watching silently, scrambled up to join our hug, his small arms winding tightly around us both. United at last, a formidable front against the cruelty that had nearly broken us. That night, as I stood vigil over the decimated garden beds, I could almost taste the promise of justice on the crisp autumn breeze. Kyle's path of destruction would lead to his downfall, the ultimate cosmic karma for his arrogance and hatred. We would emerge from his shadow, battered but unbroken, rising like the perennials that bloomed more vibrant each spring. And in the end, we would be the ones blanketing the wreckage with new life, while he withered amongst the ashes of his own making. The divorce proceedings were every bit as vicious and drawn out as we'd anticipated. True to form, Kyle fought tooth and nail, his high-priced legal team flinging accusations and attempting to discredit us at every turn. "My client is the victim of a vindictive woman looking to take advantage," his smarmy lawyer sneered during one particularly heated deposition. "The supposed abuse is a fabrication to ensure a larger settlement." Jenna's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table, but she kept her composure, refusing to rise to the bait. I couldn't help but swell with pride at her poise. If I were making it up for monetary gain, why did I wait until after the garden incident? She asked evenly. "I tried for months to make the marriage work despite his cruelty." The lawyer's oily smirk faltered slightly, but he pressed on. "And this garden incident, an overblown tantrum certainly, but hardly grounds for the extreme financial demands you're making. He destroyed months of my mother and child's hard work and joy out of pure spite." Jenna fired back, her voice hardening. "If that's not emotional cruelty and property damage, I don't know what is." As the proceedings dragged on, every scathing accusation and bad faith argument only stoked the simmering fury in my chest. Kyle's arrogance and disregard for us as human beings knew no bounds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of bitter legal combat, the judge rendered his decision. I'll never forget the look of impotent rage on Kyle's face as the settlement terms were read out, a number that would have most people set for multiple lifetimes. "This is a travesty," he erupted as soon as the gavel struck. "You're robbing me blind based on lies and embellishments." "Watch your tone," the judge warned, his expression severe. "I've reviewed all evidence and testimony thoroughly. The punitive damages for your vindictive and abusive actions are more than warranted." Kyle opened his mouth, no doubt to unleash another stream of vitriol, but seemed to think better of it. With a visible effort, he clenched his jaw and turned on his heel, storming out of the courtroom. In the aftermath, I could scarcely believe the enormity of our victory. Not just the monetary settlement, though that would ensure Jenna and Tyler never had to rely on anyone again. More importantly, we'd stood our ground against Kyle's cruelty and prevailed. As we made our way to the car, giddy with hard-won relief, Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Does this mean Kyle can never come back?" he asked, his eyes wide and hopeful. I pulled him into a fierce hug, blinking back grateful tears. "It means we never have to see that mean old bully again, sweetie. We're finally free of him for good." Jenna looped an arm around us both, her face alight with the first true unburdened smile I'd seen in years. "Mom's right. It's just going to be us three from now on, a fresh start." Over the next few weeks, we settled into our new reality with a sense of giddy disbelief. Jenna immediately put in her notice at the job Kyle had insisted she keep, ready to be a full-time mom again. And true to her word, one of the first things we did was rip out what remained of the ravaged garden. "We're starting over from scratch," I told Tyler as we surveyed the bare patch of earth, planting all new life where he tried to destroy it. The boy's face split into a gap-toothed grin, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. "Exactly," I ruffled his hair with a chuckle. "Our garden will be bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than ever before. And this time, no one can take that away from us." As we set about mapping out the new beds and selecting seeds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cosmic justice. While we were nurturing new growth from the devastation, Kyle was left bitter and broken, his wealth and arrogance reduced to rubble. In the end, his cruelty had wrought his downfall, leaving nothing but a scorched path of ruin in its wake. But for us, it was the dawn of a new beginning, a vibrant garden flourishing in the ashes, reclaimed and renewed.